Let's open that up. Oh, this Hangout is on air, so we're here. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
There's our microphone. There's our camera. We're good to go. Welcome to the latest AMA. It's May 12th, 2019. Happy to be here with you.
Happy Mother's Day to any mothers that are watching.
Yes, indeed. I'm going to adjust this camera just a little bit, and I'm going to try not to move this too much so we don't have a lot of camera shake. I've got all of your questions lined up from, thank you for posting your questions below the link, below the post, I mean. So I've got pretty much all of them here. There's a few. What we try to do is go by the rule of one person, one question, but there are a few exceptions that I've made here. Let me just move this over. Frank had a couple of very good questions in there. I'm going to answer all of those. A few other you guys had some very, very excellent questions as well. So we're just going to get to everything. And if you've got something, here's the questions. Okay, so all is
I don't have the chat
Oops.
up yet. I'm just trying to find it, so just hang on one sec.
Let me go back to our window here so I can see us. There we go.
Let's make sure that
Okay.
this is good.
And you're going to go make us, you said you're going to do coffee.
In a second.
We've been running around. So do you want to do an admin thing first?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we've got everybody on chat.
I think so. I was looking at, I have a chat thing open here. There you go. Sound is off.
There we go.
Shazam.
There's everybody. Hey, everyone.
So, hope everyone's having a good day. Some of you are over in the UK. Greetings. It's getting a little late there. So, we got Retro Dad. I think we got possibly Alistair.
Yeah. David Coleman, Mark H. in Australia, Kirsten's here.
Weird
Dean
times
is here. And I always say Technomage, but it's not, you don't say it like that, do you?
I think it would be Mage, right? Technomage.
Technomage.
Right. Okay.
You're always here. Hi.
So we should jump in. Do you want to just do like your intro admin?
Yeah.
And then we'll do the questions.
Okay. So if there's any site things, just let me know. Type them in right now. But I was just going to tell you in case you haven't seen it. We put a little newbies section. It's under the members content tab. You know that pretty much everything is in that drop down that you'll need. But just so you know, you click on the word members content and that gives you chronological. Everything else you need is just by theme, basically.
Right. Menu, members content, you click the members content thing at the top there. Some people don't think to click that. They think it's only a drop down. But it's if you click it, it gives you all members content in reverse chronological.
Yeah, it's like the recent posts, except
Right.
you get the picture and the
Right.
mini description and stuff like that. We added my account on the bottom of that drop down, and if anyone needs to cancel, because people do for different reasons, my account, that's where it is in the drop down there. At the top we have newbies guide, and we're just slowly adding things in there. And if there's anything that you think is really important to go in there, let me know, and I'll add it. The only other thing that you need to know really is our shows. That was new for some people. That's new.
the little traffic light.
No, the Our Shows tab.
Oh, the Our Shows tab, right.
Where we've broken it down into the 5 shows, and all of them will link to the latest of that show.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
I think that's basically it, but the reason why I'm saying this is we get so many questions and so many emails about it, so I just wanted to state it. Those are sort of the most important things. And as you know, there's the stoplight thing that we added to every page to let you know if there's going to be a Richard Dolan show on Monday. But you're going to change it the day of. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's actually was one of the questions we had lined up here, but we can just do it now. So I think it was, I can't remember who asked this question, but we...
Retro Pirate Truth Seeker.
That's a great name.
I know.
So, yeah, he asked, great idea having the traffic, the red light, green light, yellow light for the Richard Dolan show. Can you do that for all shows? And the answer is no.
No way.
There's no way, man. So it's enough work to do it for one. And the Richard Dolan show is the only show really where it needs it. Intelligent disclosures always every
week.
Tuesday. We never miss that.
If we do, it's going to be an exception.
When I do my Saturday live stream shows, which I call the big picture, that's been every week. I may change that. I may have to just slow that down a little bit. It's a lot of work. But for right now, those are green lights every week. I just never know what time that one will be. And then the off the cuffs, who knows when they go? That's
random. That's the fun of them.
Right.
Totally.
So really, the only one is the Richard Dolan Show, which is officially every Monday, but sometimes I do miss a week, and I don't want people to be wondering, oh, is there a new show or not? So we thought of the stoplight idea. And by the way, there will not be a new Richard Dolan Show this Monday. I just have not had an opportunity to do an interview. However, we've got some very good people in mind, and I'm pretty sure we'll have a couple of good ones in the near future. So, all right. So how about I jump into these questions?
Yeah, I just want to see, does anybody have anything about the site? Okay, the forum. Let's just talk about the forum for a second. We're still full steam ahead. This week, we will have a forum posted that you won't be able to see because we're going to test it out.
Okay. I didn't even.
Yeah, you didn't know that either. Really, Evelyn, we've had her full-time working in the back end. It's really funny how many things to do with payments and with how many members we have. There's just so much that she and I have to look after. We're just having to do this to get to the forum. I know I feel like we say this every time, and I apologize, but it's all been absolutely necessary to make it a great foundation. So, yeah. But we are testing it this week. So yay, that'll be a great thing. We're moving forward. So, and that's it.
Before you do any coffee, actually, the first question involves the both of us here, and it's kind of a fun question.
Okay.
Before we get into some of the serious stuff, so I think this is from Retro Dad. So he says to both of you, some of these, what's your favorite snack food? Do we have a favorite snack? We like popcorn sometimes.
Yeah.
We'll do up the popcorn. I don't microwave it. We put that sucker on the stove, a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt, and we just pop that up.
Butter.
Butter. You have to do. All right. So now here's a question. I think
not to mention chocolate. I mean, that's a given.
Do I have any help in writing books, scripting for shows, etc.? And the answer basically is no. I do almost all of that 100% myself. That means I've never really been able to figure out how to have a good assistant. And I did co-author a book with Bryce Zabel about a decade ago, and we collaborated really very well on that. I would say that I was the project manager of that book, to be honest with you, but Bryce and I really did 50-50 on the writing. But other than that one example, I've never done any kind of genuine collaboration with another researcher. It's hard for me to do it. I don't know. It would be nice to do, and it would be very helpful. Even having like a genuine research assistant. There have been people who, of course, a lot of you guys actually have provided me with a lot of very useful information, but I've never had a dedicated research assistant or like a writing assistant ever. I've just never figured out how that would work for me.
It's tough for you because you're very focused.
Someone else asked, I was at an event once with Nick Redfern a bunch of years ago and a few others. I think we were in the UK. And someone asked a similar question, like, why don't you researchers collaborate more together? And I thought about it, and I realized, like, we're like cats. Like we're intellectual. We're like these little artists, and that sounds like highfalutin, but we're like these little artist types of people who do our thing. And like, actually, Nick Redfern's a guy that I would probably enjoy doing a collaboration with, but it's, he's got his ideas, I've got my ideas, and we don't really work with each other on that basis. And it's the same with me. I really never had any help almost ever on any of those types of things. And all the shows that we do, like that we do for Intelligent Disclosure, I basically do the research. Although you're now on Tuesdays, Tracy throws herself into those subjects, but I'll pick the subject. We'll talk about it. I'll decide, and then I'll go through the game plan of the show. And of course, my Saturday shows, which I've really enjoyed going back to this thing, I write those out. And I'll always write them out that Saturday morning. So that's 2,000 words, 2,400 words, 2,300 words. And I'll sit out wherever I can sit and I'll just write what I want to write. And then that's my thing.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's how I do it. This is a question, I guess, for me. What do your kids think of what you do? Does it affect their lives? Not a whole lot. They think, you know, my daughter, when she was 4 years old, she saw me on the History Channel. And she said, "Daddy, are you famous?" And that was the first question. And I said, well, maybe a little bit, not very famous. But they've grown up with me being this UFO researcher, and they've seen me do the TV things and be somewhat of a public person. And I think they're perfectly cool with it. In terms of the subject matter, I can say they're both very open to subject of UFOs. I think they probably take it as a given. But they're at this point in life. They're in their early 20s. They're looking at their own professional trajectory. This is not a thing for them. So it's like a cool thing that Dad does, and I think that's about it. Some of their friends from time to time, I think, thought it was way more interesting than they think. So,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's how it goes.
Yeah, it feels like we're always just doing crazy things. It's like, okay, we just need to let you guys know we're doing a show later.
Right.
It's just a normal thing going on in the background.
One of the stories I like to tell, and this is a totally true story, when my daughter was going through her difficult teenage phase, which lasted about 4 years, at least, she was in that exasperated tone that teenagers like to have. And she said, "Dad, why can't you be a normal dad like everyone else?" And I just laughed. I really laughed loudly. And I said, "Are you old enough to be taking drugs? Because that's the only reason I can understand why you would say this question. You know I'm never going to be like a normal dad. This is what I do." And I think she's totally into it now. My son has, I think he loves it as well. Actually, I think they're both into it. Do we have a favorite pastime, hobby, reading, travel, etc.? I don't know. I have a lot of different ones. I enjoy the gardening these days.
Pastimes?
The hobbies?
Yeah, we're really into the outdoor backyard thing right now. For me, I like to, I'm big on dream journaling and meditation and a bunch of things like this. So those are kind of, I like exploring ESP and all these types of topics really deeply. So that's sort of my little side passion.
I have a couple of chess buddies. So I play chess on my phone. There's a couple of people. I shouldn't say this because I don't want to get overloaded with games. But there's a few guys on my chess app. I have Chess with Friends, and I'll bust a move usually a couple of times a day with some of those guys. I enjoy my chess. And my other little obsession, which Tracy will vouch for, is I've discovered a little bit of genealogy. So I've done Ancestor.com, and I'm going through all of their tools to find some fascinating things that I never knew about my genealogy. That's a fun thing. In terms of reading, I didn't tell you this. I was reading Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic Wars yesterday a little bit.
He reads so much. I mean, you can imagine just from the way he is. I'm sure everybody can imagine so much. It's like breathing.
Yeah, and I'm reading on and off at night after you fall asleep. I'll break open the Kindle. I'm reading a history of early Middle Tennessee right now. So that's just west of the Appalachians and the first settlements and the settlers of the Tennessee and the Cumberland Valley and all of that. I find it absolutely fascinating. I'm still reading UFO things. Like I read UFO things during the day. It's like work. So at night, I like to do other things. Okay. How's that? This is
it's good. And do you play music instruments? And someone just asked that because he does.
Oh, I play my harmonica.
Harmonica.
So I've got I don't play them as much anymore, but I love my harps. I've got a nice collection of them. I've got all the keys. It was a funny thing. Many years ago, like I just thought, I'd like to play a harmonica. And I ended up getting a $5 one from Kmart. And I fell in love with my harmonica. This is like 20 years ago. And I taught myself the basics, like a hunting we will go. And Mary had a little lamb, and I was off to the races. I taught myself blues. And I play all kinds of things. I enjoy my harmonica very much. It's been a while since I played it a lot. I haven't really played it a lot with you, but
You did in the beginning, but that's when you still had Jenny, and she just did not like it at all.
my dog. She liked it too much. I think it was her problem.
Well, it's hard to tell. It's kind of borderline. It seemed like it was hurting your ears.
She would lose her mind.
Yeah,
howling.
And Linda, the library is massive. She was asking how big is the library.
Well, I've had to get rid of a lot of books
everywhere, but his books are just, I mean, it's massive. There's a whole room in the basement that is floor to ceiling, back to front.
Yeah, shelving.
It's incredible. And we have in the other part of the basement just boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes. And then we have some up here, and then I have a whole room full of books.
Truth was, for years I had so many books. I had thousands and thousands of books, and I just didn't have enough shelving. So I had them in boxes up in the attic back in those days, and most of their books I'll never read again. So I've been collecting them since the early 80s probably, and I look at them and I'm thinking the 1920s history of, you know, pre-Third Republic France. Like, how many times I'm going to read that? So that's all gone. All of those books, I don't need them, really. So I've had to winnow down the library. I'm sure a lot of you are probably the same way. And I think more books in the future will have to go. We have the Rochester UFO meetup. They want book donations.
Yeah.
They'll probably get a bunch of my books that
yeah.
I'll just have as a lending library.
And for anyone who hasn't been here before, I know sometimes every week there's some new people who haven't. And it's always funny because you're so used to the chat going so fast on YouTube. But this is a total back-end private party, which is so nice. It's just, it's always a small group. This way I can kind of keep track of people on the Intelligent Disclosure and Richard Saturday thing. It's so crazy. I mean, you guys all know it's hard to pay attention to Richard and see the chat and catch everything. It's crazy. So this is so refreshing to have you guys who are the members here, and it's just it's this nice pace. And so what we try and do is we go back and forth between the questions that were posted under the AMA page, and as well as hanging out with you guys. So we'll be back and forth sort of between the two.
I want to keep going.
Alistair plays the kazoo, by the way.
The kazoo. Nice. All right, we'll have to do something, Alistair, when I'm in the UK. We'll jam. So this is from David Maluenda. He just I actually answered this in the chat in the comments, but I'll just mention it here. David asks, any plan on updating your Wikipedia page with actual good info for peeps who look you up? Yeah. I don't really know how to do that. Can I just become a Wikipedia editor? Is that how it works?
I don't think so. I don't know.
I don't think they let you. I've known a number of friends, colleagues in this field who tell me they have a horrible time trying to keep their wiki page updated without it being trashed by the wiki editors, who really do, in my opinion, have a definite agenda against the subject that we do, against UFOs. They're very, very tough on it. So, but I really see the need to have at least the best wiki page I can have, because people do go to it. So I want to work on that.
Someone emailed us, but we can't. The emails are like the chat. The emails go so fast. Like, we'll have a bunch that we're trying to get to, and so many more pile on.
But someone offered to do.
Someone did offer to do it, and
if anyone
I think they are a wiki editor or something like that, and we can't find the email. We can't remember who it was. So
I'll have to do a search on it. If anyone of you guys have advice on this, send us a private email. We'll look for it, and I will want to act on it. I really do want to update my Wikipedia pages here. Any of the regular, any genuine ufologists who have wiki pages, they all have the most terrible pages. But it's not just relegated to ufology. I was looking at Hal Puthoff's Wikipedia page, and it's just a trash heap. Like, they make him seem so ridiculously inept. Putting in the word pseudoscience in there and everything else. It's ridiculous. But it's necessary. So Frank has a couple of excellent questions. Really good questions. Frank, thanks for asking these. I'm going to deal with all of them to the best of my ability. I don't have definite answers to some of these, but they're interesting, and let's just get it out there. So his first one, I would like to know your views on the Voyager Golden Records. Carl Sagan, who was not a huge proponent of aliens or having visited Earth, sat on the NASA committee that came up with the greetings on the records for the launch with the 2 Voyager probes in 1977. We all remember this a little bit, right? So Frank pulls up information I never knew. And they're good questions. Why were dead languages like Akkadian, Latin, Ancient Greek, Sumerian, Aramaic, near extinct, and Hittite included? Some of these died out 2,000 years BC. Why was ancient Egyptian not included? Why was Quechua included, but not Mayan, Aztec, or Toltec? Like ancient Egypt, these cultures had pyramids and architectural and celestial knowledge. Why would Sagan include ancient dead languages if he did not believe a spacefaring civilization had not been to Earth already and communicated with the ancients? The only other possibility, and a remote one, was that these languages would be understood because they had developed quite separately on other planets, or that NASA is already communicating with others in one of these or in modern language. So that's an interesting question. The only answer that I thought of, I don't have an answer to this, so I'm just guessing. It could be practical. Is ancient Egypt, you're talking about like Egyptian hieroglyphics, I suppose. One could do that. There's Coptic print. I remember, learning when Champollion deciphered the Rosetta Stone in, I think, 1798 or thereabouts. There are a lot of these languages. There were 3 languages on that thing, and they were not fully understood, but he broke the code. He figured them out. So it could be that maybe not all of them were sufficiently understood to be able to give a greeting. I'm just guessing here. The real question is, why would they use dead languages? And it's possible because that the dead languages are a more basic, kind of primitive, early form of human language. It's the only thing I could really think about, as opposed to 20th century language, which is developed in a highly sophisticated way. Maybe it's got a complexity that the earlier languages don't have. Doesn't make any sense to me either. I don't really know. Sagan's attitude about these other beings is not really clear to me. Yes, we know famously toward the last few decades of his life, he was hardcore open skeptic about UFOs. His last book, what was it called? The Dark something, Demon Haunted World. And he says a number of things against UFO belief. But Sagan, we all know, in his early professional years, was very engaged in the idea of ancient visitation. In the early 1960s, he made a very famous statement toward that effect. It's obvious that he believed in it. And to me, it's just as obvious that once Carl Sagan became prominent enough in his field, he was brought into line. That is by people like Donald Menzel and other professionals who, I think, I don't have proof of this, but I would bet anything they made it very clear to him, you need to have a more acceptable opinion on this in the public realm, or you're not going to go anywhere. So I don't really know what Sagan was about. Someone told me his home in Cornell was barricaded, locks and locks. We have friends who live in Ithaca. Peter Robbins is there, and Sagan lived in Ithaca, New York, at Cornell, near Cornell University for many years. Cornell, getting mixed up. He also had a lot of connections with the U.S. intelligence community. I've often wondered what Sagan really knew. So I wish I could have answered that question better, Frank. And Frank asked a couple of very good, kind of related questions on the Iranian case that we talked about, particularly the capabilities of the F-4 Phantom. So one question he asked, and I don't have the answer to this, I looked up probably the same way Frank did, was the Phantom the F-4D or the F-4E, both of which the U.S. sold to Iran. And he asked this because the F-4E had a superior weapon called the internal Vulcan cannon. And if And if the F4E had this cannon, if it was an F4E fighting, why wouldn't they have used that? That would have been a highly effective weapon.
Well, I don't know much about weapons, but I do know from that case that he was going after a heat-seeking missile. That was what he was planning to launch to retaliate. So I don't know if that's what that is, but I do know that it had heat-seeking weapons on it.
Right. Well, the earlier version had what Frank described as a Sidewinder missile. Now, the AIM-9 missile, I don't really know a lot about the technical specs of these weapons, so you're going to have to forgive me for this. Like you, I went to the wiki page and I looked up the Phantom F4 for the Iranian Imperial Air Force, and I learned, yes, they had the F4Ds and the F4Es. They had them both, like over 200, and I've not been able to figure out what ones they scrambled for this intercept. So I really have no idea. Now, the real question that you had about this, which I think is quite interesting, and I want to read this. Did the UFO, assuming it actually did use some kind of electromagnetic jamming against the Phantom, as opposed to the Phantom experiencing system failure from another cause, did the UFO sense that it had been acquired by the infrared seeker head of the missile before the missile launch? This would indicate that the UFO was giving off a heat signature and considered itself under threat. Another option is that the UFO was demonstrating tech superiority. Well, I think it was doing that in either case. So I think that's a great question. And I don't know about the IR signature, if it was giving off one or not. I would guess it probably was, but I don't really know. But the real interesting thing about this is it reminded me of what we know about the Tic Tac incident from 2004, in which that object arrived at the rendezvous point where the F-18A Super Hornets were directed to appear. They were directed to go to a certain rendezvous point. The UFO was not at that point at that time when they were directed to go there. When they arrived at that point, the Tic Tac UFO was waiting for them. And this is according to Luis Elizondo. He's made this statement a couple of times, and I think it's at the To the Stars website. So the implications of that are quite interesting as well, as you can imagine, because from everything that I've learned, the U.S. Navy used and uses highly sophisticated encrypted communications to give these instructions. And the intelligence behind this Tic Tac UFO in 2004 apparently was able to listen in on those communications, no problem, and to understand the nomenclature that was being used by the Navy to direct those pilots to go to that certain point, and was there waiting for them. Now, again, this is according to Luis Elizondo. So what that would indicate to me, it's one of two things. One of the members a couple of months ago mentioned this would indicate that this might be some U.S. black budget or breakaway terrestrial tech that is totally familiar with the Navy's encryption. That's possible, I suppose, although it just strikes me as ridiculously advanced to be able to do what this thing did. But let's just say. Or the other possibility is that these other beings can easily defeat our communications and easily understand them in a way that is vastly beyond. And so I go back to 1976, the Iranian case, and I believe that this thing had somehow advanced knowledge of what was going on inside that F4 Phantom, whether it was a D or an E, and just knew what to do.
NTME, I don't know if you want to go by anything else for this, so it's easier to say, but I don't think it had anything to do with Sidewinder itself. I say this because the Sidewinder can be sent off the rail without lock-on. I assume
yeah, because it's a heat-seeking missile that will look for its target, and so okay. Well, that's the best. Oh, and Mark H. writes, the Colonel's Phantom had the cannon. The picture he was standing in front of that's the one. If that's the one. Oh, Well,
Okay.
it's worth looking into more. So that's an interesting possibility. Thanks for that, Mark. It's fascinating, like how this happens. Something else. MTMA9 says you can shoot a sidewinder without an IR signature. It
Infrared.
just won't track. So it was probably affecting the aircraft systems and had nothing to do with the sidewinder. Okay. I wonder if there's a really good technical analysis of this event from a technically proficient military point of view. I would love to read such an account of it. I'm not aware. There may be one. It's worth looking into. These are really good questions. And Frank had one other thing to say about the event in general, which I think is really on point. Just in general, you could go into the comments below. He pointed out the critical geostrategic importance of Iran, particularly in the late 70s. You're talking, it's the Cold War, of course. But again, you look at a map and you look where Iran is at that particular time, and it was a very, very important location for the U.S. And the question would have to be asked, like, as he pointed out in his question or in his point, the U.S. and the Soviets were always engaging in airspace violations of each other, triggering radar installations and testing electronic defenses and so forth. This was a constant theme. This was actually a big part of the Korean shoot-down in 1983, which that's a heck of an interesting story. But be that as it may, because that was almost certainly a case of the U.S. using electronic surveillance over the Soviets, with civilians being held as hostages, essentially, in this aircraft, daring the Russians, like, you're not going to shoot down this aircraft because we have people. Anyway, this kind of thing happened all the time. And Frank's, if I read it right, his suggestion was these other intelligence were probably quite interested in these back and forth games that the U.S. and the Soviets were playing at that very, very important location. And I would think, yes, for sure. The real question I would ask is, that you'd have to ask, is could this possibly have been Russian Soviet technology? It's a reasonable thing to ask in general because it's right there. It's right at the Soviet border, practically. But I just have a hard time seeing that. And if anyone else has an explanation that's otherwise, I'd love to hear it. But I can't see the Russians as being behind the Iranian encounter at 1976. There were some very good ones I was nearly going to include from 1978. A couple of photographs from Iran of UFOs in that year. I was describing them to you, but I don't think I showed you. But they're two hat-shaped UFO photographs. They're fascinating. I'll take them out and hopefully post them. Yeah. So there was definitely things going on in Iran back then. Probably, in fact, they are going on today. We just don't have a lot of data.
As far as it being Russian, it would just seem odd to me that if it was, they would just hang out there for so many hours.
That's a 5-6 hour event,
right?
Right over Tehran.
You would think that would give the enemy a lot of time to assess the technology
and to shoot it down.
Right. So that's my main thinking of why it wouldn't be Soviet.
Yeah.
Fair
enough. Okay. Thank you, Frank, for those. Oh, something else. My kids are watching. Can you say hi to Harvey and Matilda?
Hi, Harvey.
Hey, guys.
You guys are so far away from us, but so close.
Where? Oh, this is out in
the UK, right?
Cornwall, I believe, right? All right. Here's one of the crazy things. I told you I was doing all my ancestry. I have century after century after century of ancestors who all hail from Cornwall and Devon, that whole area. So that I thought was kind of fun. I want to go out there one day now. Anyway, great to see you guys.
Okay.
Onward.
When we come back, I love this question of Greg's. And by the way, David, I saw your comment about your dream journals. That's super interesting. I have so many as well.
Greg Phillips, Richard, do you think the CIA or military ever stages fake UFO events? In Jacques Vallée's diaries, he claimed to have secured documents in 1990 that the CIA was simulating alien abductions in Brazil. Oh, Valet also talked about the Pentagon Memorandum from 1953, which his interpretation is that the CIA was creating or going to create fake UFO events. Maybe it wasn't the CIA. I think Valet completely misreads that memorandum, personally. In terms of creating actual fake UFO events, and by the way, simulating alien abductions in Brazil, I'm going to have to go over that again. I am really skeptical of that. I'm super skeptical that that's the case. I don't know where Valet was coming up with this. It just makes no sense to me at all. In terms of creating fake UFO events, I mean, I'm just asking myself, which events in history has anyone, like in one single case, demonstrated to be fake or caused by the U.S.? Even 22 years ago, Gerald Haynes of the CIA and the NRO published a declassified, wrote for Studies in Intelligence. You know, this was when the CIA claimed in 1997 that, oh yeah, a lot of those UFO sightings of the 1950s, that was actually our U-2 and our A-12 Oxcart spy planes. Really, Gerald Haynes? Which ones exactly were caused? Which UFO cases were caused by these? He doesn't offer a single example. And it's not really credible. In fact, it's very not credible. I mean, maybe one or two. Okay, but those aircraft fly very, very high in the air. They don't maneuver, they don't drop, they don't descend, they don't do anything except fly very high. And in the case of the A-12 and the SR-71, really fast. So they're interesting. How many UFO cases is that going to cause? And particularly when you get into the details of these cases, up close and personal landing cases, of which there are so many. So I'm very not into Valet's idea here that the CIA was creating fake UFO events. Someone's got to give some examples, and I'm not aware of anyone providing with a single example. Now I'll go into Valet's. This is in his Forbidden Science. Is that the name of his diaries? I think I've got the full one downstairs, so I'll pull it up. Okay. Anything else here that we want to look at? Redfern alludes to Antonio Villas Boas abduction being mind control experiment. Engine noises were heard. I'll have to look into that. Maybe. That's an interesting case. That's from the late 50s. That's Brazil. I don't know. I'd have to see what Nick has to say about that. I mean, some of these abduction cases they're odd. There was the argument years ago that the Betty and Barney Hill case was not alien abduction, but some kind of military abduction. Why? Barney in his hypnosis says they're Nazis. You know, they're wearing caps. Someone inserts a needle into Betty. That seems actually like an early version of pregnancy tests a few years before they introduced them. And so the argument is that the technology may have been like 10 years ahead of us, but not 1,000 years ahead of us. Now, you talk to Betty Hill about that, or you talk to Kathleen Martin, her niece, about that, and they are utterly dismissive of that idea. Mm-hmm. And I think Barney would be dismissive of it as well. I don't think he believed that they were human beings at all. Even though he said they're Nazis, I don't think he meant they're actual Germans from the Second World War. So, but there are odd things about some of these abduction cases, and the Villas Boas case, you know, there have been attempts to debunk it by arguing that he had access to some UFO literature and that he modeled his case on some other case that was supposedly described in Brazil. I don't know.
Okay. You got David now?
Yeah, David.
David's here in chat, so.
Hey, David. Yeah, these are good questions too. So David says, was there anything in the WikiLeaks material that mentions or connects with UFO, UAP? Yeah, a little bit. Actually, I reminded myself of this before we went on, and I pulled open a couple of tabs. Even going back to 2010, if you remember, and this is it right here. This is from Britain's The Telegraph. Assange talked about, he actually made some disparaging comments. He says, many weirdos email us about UFOs or how they discovered that they were the Antichrist while talking with their ex-wife at a garden party over a pot plant. He's like making fun of us. But he did say that they did get, he says, it's worth noting that in yet to be published parts of the Cablegate archive, there are indeed references to UFOs. And there have been UFO things that have come out over the years. There's, through WikiLeaks, some political statements by different politicians about their belief in UFOs, or in one case, you have a Tajik mayor, Tajikistan of Central Asia, whose mayor said I think this is the one who said that, oh, no, I'm getting them all mixed up, but there's not a whole lot of WikiLeaks stuff that has actually come out. There's nothing explosive in terms of what WikiLeaks has done that, where is our window here so we can see ourselves, that relates to UFOs, in my opinion. The Podesta emails, leaks dealing with Tom DeLonge, and those folks a couple of years ago are probably the most interesting WikiLeaks releases, but even that doesn't really count as inside scoop. So, and then, yeah.
No, just if David has another, and then I'm going to ask you one.
This one actually will be able to come back to later in the week, because I'm trying to get my window here. Oh, here we go. Sorry about this. When did NORAD back down from sharing radar sightings? This was mentioned in the 1975 video. When was the last time NORAD gave a confirmed radar signal of an unknown? Okay, so later in this coming week, we're going to publish the lecture by Victor Vinciani of Toronto, Canada, who had a lot to say about this. Now, Victor is, we just published an off the cuff with him last night, like 12 minutes long. It's actually really interesting. But one of the things Victor talked about were Canadian and NORAD documents that he has been going through. Now, he actually surprised me. I didn't realize there was so much of what he found by NORAD that is available. It's actually not a lot, but he got over 100 pages.
You got some interesting stuff.
He did indeed. So I thought NORAD was kind of a closed door, but I was wrong. Now, what is true is that in the early 80s, NORAD did become very effectively exempt from freedom of information. But maybe there have been some changes, and some information by NORAD has been released after all. I think I maybe overstated the case a bit.
Well, it seems like in Victor's case, they released the information to him as a mistake, because they then sent him a letter after the fact saying they're not allowed to do it. It's illegal for someone to own it.
That's true, yes.
But somehow they had already sent him these reports.
Back in 2004, he got them.
Right.
And then he did a later request many years later, and they said, no, those are not, you're not supposed to have those. But they actually did release them. So it's bureaucratic snafu, but he did get some documents, and they are quite interesting. But I'm going to leave the follow-up of that for when we publish his lecture, and that will be very soon. Quite interesting. So
forgive the way we shot it. We were just sort of randomly trying to capture it, so it's not the best quality, but you can hear everything and you can see the slides, which is important for when he pulls up the NORAD files.
The audio is good.
Yeah.
So the question is, when was the last time NORAD gave a confirmed radar signal of an unknown? Well, Victor shows a bunch of sightings from 2001 in which NORAD was confirming radar unknowns. which they call TOIs, targets of interest. They didn't call them UFOs. There's probably later as well, but I don't know specifically. Really good question.
Okay, before that one, Emma asks, do you think that there are some humans that aliens are not able to control via telepathy, not able to erase memories or paralyze? Good question. Hard to, I guess it's just pure speculation.
I don't know. You go off of, let's say we work with Jacob's theory on this. So David Jacobs believes through his people that he's regressed is that so there are different levels of capability that the different types of aliens have. So an insectoid mantid type has a very powerful ability to control you neurologically and to control your thoughts as well. Various levels of hybrids, a little bit less powerful, but still very strong. But that will be affected by the number of people in a room. So if there's a lot of humans and there's just one of them, their ability would be not so much. There are limits. That's how he would describe it. So is that the question then? And then, no, there are differences among people. It's a good question. I don't think anyone really knows the answer to this.
It seems like from all of the abduction accounts that they do have this ability. It seems widespread because people remember it in a spotty way. They can't usually remember the whole thing, although some people do remember the whole thing. So I don't know. I would say for me, I currently believe that they do have some form of mental control over everyone.
Right. Well, I don't even think she was necessarily disputing that. I think Emma was just wondering, are there some of us who have an ability to resist it to some extent? And,
some humans have the ability to resist it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a good question. And I think it is possible, absolutely. But that may just be me being optimistic. But I think it should be possible. You know, if you've got conscious mental control over your faculties, and you work on that type of a thing. But
many people do work on that type of thing with different modalities. And, you know, perhaps there are some people with an innate sense of this, but I still don't think.
We seem like we're outmatched.
We do, for sure.
So this is Susie Russell. And
Susie's here too, by the way.
Hey, Susie. Actually, Susie, she had a couple of statements. I think overall concerned with the long-term viability of any alternative person out on YouTube platform, the way things are going, and we totally agree with that. She just points out Jimmy Church has just issued a brief statement on YouTube to the effect that Fade to Black Radio will no longer stream live or archive its shows on its platform. Richard, we need a plan B. And you and I were talking about this. So, yeah, Jimmy I did an interview with him about a week ago, and I didn't realize that he was having so much trouble with YouTube either.
Yeah.
I had no idea. But his channel was fully demonetized for like a week, I think.
Yep.
Something like that.
That's what he said.
I didn't think his channel was taken down, but I think he was fully demonetized, right?
I was under the impression it was taken down.
Well, it was something. Like YouTube really went after him, and truthfully, I think Jimmy is way less political and strident than I am. But maybe I'm misreading it. I mean, I don't really know why YouTube would take him down. So the point is, like, this is a very, very fluid situation that we're in, and YouTube's policies are absolutely opaque. They don't give any explanation as to why they do what they do. You try getting them to do it. We have our person Lori who helps run our YouTube channel, and every time I get dinged
which is
by YouTube,
becoming almost every week.
It does. She will write to them and find out like what's going on, and they don't ever give it reasons.
What she does is it's an algorithm that makes the decision, I guess, initially, and she appeals it for manual, for manual review. And most of the time, we get it back. But there have
Not
been,
all the time.
yeah, we just went in and looked, and actually there are quite a few that have lost partial.
Our one in 1975 got dinged, and it still is. Like, why? What was offensive about that? I cannot imagine anything. So we do need a plan B. Somehow, we looked into Vimeo, but that's not really as practical as I would have thought. Vimeo has very major restrictions on quantity of what you can upload.
Yes, you have to pay quite a bit for that.
And even if you do that, you're not really able to get a whole lot up there.
And people can't go watch it for free anyhow. People have to pay as far as I can understand, to watch it. And
one thing, you could purchase just a huge server, I suppose, and house all of your videos for your site on that server, and that could happen. That might be the way we go. But whatever the case is, we are going to make sure that all the videos that I've done will be housed safely somewhere. If not on YouTube, they'll go somewhere else. So we'll keep it going. And the real plan B, I'm going to be honest with you, is this website.
Yeah. This
Richard Dolan Members is, in fact, it's not just plan B, it's plan A. It's the home base where everything happens, because no matter what YouTube does or other platforms may want to do, I expect that we'll be able to keep our website for their information.
Which is part of the reason why we're spending so much time working in the back end, because we know, people have been pushing us for Patreon, but we still know that's governed in the same way by the same people as YouTube. So really, this is the safest place. So we want to keep working on the back end and making it right so we can build it out and expand.
Don't have a lot of confidence in Patreon either as a long-term solution for these types of things. But basically what we need is a platform to house a lot of video. And we do want to find something, an alternative.
Yeah.
I don't know how we'll do that, but we will.
Hey to Susie. Hey, Mark.
There's Daily Motion. Is that even out there anymore?
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, they're European. I think French. They were big. I don't know if they're still big. We should look into these things. Okay, so this is from Jean-Jacques Gary P. Jean-Jacques, greetings. Hello, Richard. Hello, Tracy. I believe that the CIC, that's the Counterintelligence Corps, has played a very important role in suppressing information about UFOs since the Second World War. He says, I've read a couple of very interesting books dealing with the CIC. I should read these books. America's Secret Army, The Untold Story of the Counterintelligence Corps. All of these are listed in the comments below this post, by the way. Soldiers, Spies, and the Rat Line by Colonel James Milano and Patrick Brogan. Of course, there's absolutely nothing about UFOs in these books, but the fact that the CIC was responsible for the security of atomic research, installations like Oak Ridge, lead me to believe that CIC was initially tasked with covering up UFO. That, I believe, is true. The CIC in the 1940s and early 50s does pop up in UFO narratives. As a matter of fact, if you go even to the original Roswell case, Sheridan Cavett is the officer who accompanies Jesse Marcel to the Roswell debris field. And guess what Sheridan Cavett was? He was a CIC officer. He was Counterintelligence Corps. So they were right there at the beginning of the UFO phenomenon. And Cavett's role throughout that whole process, it's really not that difficult to see, was to keep this entire thing suppressed. Unlike Marcel, Cavett continually kept throwing cold water over the Roswell case for into his retirement. So, yes, I think there's a lot of room to explore the CIC connection. His question is, have I ever had contacts with former CIC officers as whistleblowers? The answer is no. Have I ever been able to access CIC documents concerning UFOs? And the answer, I think, not only have I not, I don't know of any Counterintelligence Corps originating documents on the UFO phenomenon. I'm not aware of a single one. So that's a really good point.
I was just looking, by the way. Just looking back, Susie said, by the way, it was taken down Jimmy's YouTube, just so everybody else knows.
Wow.
Yeah.
They actually took the whole channel.
Yeah, I thought he said that, yeah.
but he's got it back up.
And Kirsten, you were asking, you said you couldn't find the interview. I couldn't find it either, but I did see there was something of his that said an update on the YouTube situation. So we could look into that.
Well, that interview then would be at the KGRA website, because that's what we did it through, was the KGRA thing. Jimmy's Fade to Black show is hosted by KGRA. So I think what I'll do, I'm going to get that interview and I want to at least host it as an unlisted, at least for our folks here. Because that was actually a good interview. The thing about Jimmy Church, some people like to hate on Jimmy Church. I'll say this, he gets the best interviews out of me that I give to anyone. It's really true. I don't know what it is, but when I get on,
you riled up.
I get riled up, and I get, and he'll always ask me to do an interview, and I'll always initially say, no, I'm not in the mood. And he'll just hound me, and I'll end up doing it. But I have to say that they're always,
you always enjoy it.
They're positive for me.
Yeah.
And I tend to be a little more free with him than anyone else that I talk to. I don't know why. But he's got a way of opening me up, and
well, you guys have known each other for a long time. I mean, together you've done so many interviews,
quite a few.
So there's that familiarity as a baseline.
It does help. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a good foundation for a good interview.
So actually, I appreciated those questions, Jacques, on the CIC, and this is one of the reasons a forum would be great on this site, because if someone does work on the CIC, we can post it here. One place that would be actually as one of the best forums probably anywhere is the Above Top Secret website, ATS. And there's a good question. They may have some information on the CIC there. ATS is a very, very amazing forum. I have to say, they have a lot of incredible information there. I think they've got some professional debunker types there, to be honest, but there's a lot of amazing research that appears on that site as well. It's always worth going to. So Eric Karch. Hey, Eric.
Wait, before you start, Eric.
Oh, yeah.
So Susie is the, she said you should listen to the update. It explains everything. Is it on YouTube? Is the update on YouTube?
Jimmy Church's update?
I assume it is. Yeah. Because I think he said when you guys did the interview, he expected he was going to be getting back up again. And I'm pretty sure I was on YouTube when I saw the update. Yes, it is. Okay, thank you.
By the way, Alistair says, finding it harder to access certain websites in the UK through Google. Richard D. Hall's is often unavailable. That's disturbing. I haven't spoken to Richard D. Hall in a long time. I've said a number of times that I have a lot of respect for what he does. He's a really good researcher. His show is called The Rich something. Rich, I don't know. I like him. He's a very smart guy, and he's very brave. And he's not really a UFO guy so much as, I guess we could say, a conspiracy sort of a guy. But I've always found him interesting and very logical. And if it wouldn't surprise me at all that he's gotten some kind of rich planet. That's it. Thank you, Alistair. That he's getting hassled somehow by the powers that be. Don't know. I'd like to find him and figure out a way to do an interview with him. So should I get to Eric here? I've got Eric Carson. Hello, Eric. Eric writes, Richard, I've recently completely extracted myself from all mainstream media, and it feels liberating. Oh, man, it sure is. I've done that years ago, but I'm on my phone, one of the things that I will look at every day is Western mainstream corporate news. So like all the NBC and the Fox and the MSNBC and the CNN. I look at them all every day. At least I read some of them every day because I like to see how ridiculous is it getting. And it's pretty ridiculous. So he goes on. I get a lot of opinion on alt media, and there seems to be a belief that Trump was once an accident, that the elites, whoever they may be, planned for Hillary to be the chosen one for the U.S. presidency. Lately, though, I hear opinions that really Trump is part of the plan, and he is nothing more than a pawn for the cabal, the Illuminati, or whatever we want to call it. I get the feeling, listening to you over time, that you're not really a Trump supporter, but that you do agree with some of the things he has done last couple of years. question is, how do you see Trump? Is he really bucking against the system, or was this the plan all along? I struggle with this because even though he's kind of a blowhard with a huge ego, he has done some things that I agree with. Not a UFO question, but being into politics, I thought I'd ask your opinions. Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm happy to discuss it. I think it's interesting. And I find Trump a fascinating subject. So I kind of agree with a lot of what is going on in this. Julian Assange, just before the US election himself, stated Trump will not be allowed to win. And in fact, I remembered reading this or hearing him say it, and I thought, yes, I fully agree. And you could see through the US election process throughout all of 2016, it was an incredible. I mean, Trump is so hated by the American media today, but he was so hated throughout the entire campaign. It was an unbelievable experience. Like, it has never happened in any of American presidency election ever, that one candidate was so clearly singled out by the entire mainstream media, with the exception of Fox. They were the only source that did not hate Trump, and you could tell they were pretty supportive of Trump. But even on Fox, there were people there who hated Trump. And why is that? So I will just say this again. I will never believe it has anything to do with his personality, not fundamentally. Yes, guy's a trash talker from New York City. He sounds like every person that I ever grew up with. That's the God's honest truth. So that type of language doesn't really offend me personally. It's not presidential, but he sounds like everyone that I ever grew up with. The reason I think Trump has been demonized, I mean, really turned into Hitler 2.0 by the American media, as I have said many times, has to do with the fact that as a candidate, he talked against the two fundamental pillars of America's ruling establishment. He talked against the neoconservative dream of American empire. What other candidate talked against the American wars? The war against Libya, which I think remains an unconscionable crime against an entire nation, and destroy that whole nation. Trump talked against that. Well, he was absolutely right to. Even against the war in Iraq in 2003. Hillary certainly wouldn't do that, and not even Bernie Sanders did that. How ironic is it that as the candidate, anyway, Trump was the closest thing we had to a peace candidate in the primaries. And then the others, this is the neocon empire. Then there's the whole opposition to the neoliberal globalization program, which, by the way, I will simply point out for the 20th time publicly, that he took the exact position on that matter that Ralph Nader took 20 years earlier. Go back to Nader's speeches of the late 1990s, and huge amounts of them could have been just taken by Trump in 2016. And so what's that all about? So Trump put himself in opposition to the fundamental direction that not just America, but the entire Western establishment's been moving for a long, long time. And he did it because he had a lot of people supporting him. There's been a lot of working class, not college educated people. They're not the most all sophisticated. They don't all speak politically correct language. They're working people, right? And they kind of realized that this one guy, more than anyone else, was kind of sort of speaking to what they were about. Now, what's happened since then? Well, you can see Trump has been surrounded, particularly in international, by ultra neocons, Pompeo, particularly, and his whole defense establishment is very, very neoconish, in my opinion. Brings in Elliot Abrams, for God's sake, to do regime change in Venezuela. So, in my opinion, Trump has been completely
keep going. No, keep going.
Completely taken in by the neocon agenda. Now, he still offers tremendous resistance to the neoliberal globalization. I mean, he's throwing tariffs against China right now, for God's sake, and getting trashed in places like Bloomberg and the rest of the mainstream media for how horrible it is. Well, I'm not expert enough in the economics to know one way or the other, but my instinct is that I support that. The first thing he did on his first day as president, I thought, was right on great. He pulled America out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which by the way, we learned about through WikiLeaks. If you remember any of this stuff. So there's a lot of things that he has said that I fully agree with. There's a lot that I think he's been completely taken out of context when he says, like made him say something like the aliens, the immigrants are animals, which was total nonsense. What he said was the MS-13 gang were animals, and I fully agree with that. MS-13 murdered over a dozen people from my high school. I grew up in Brentwood, Long Island, and MS-13 has murdered many, many people in my hometown. How did they get there? Well, that's a whole other story. This is independent of anything to do with UFOs or anything else, but I think it's a totally reasonable policy for any nation to have secure borders. I don't see what the big deal is. Why that's a horrible thing. You have a nation, you lock your door at night because you don't want people just strolling in. You have a border that actually means something. That's valuable. And you regulate your immigration. I don't see what the problem is with that. So there are certain things that he says are very common sense. And by the way, that policy was a very formally accepted policy of the Democratic Party for many, many years. Why? Because they understood that if you have all kinds of illegal immigration, it drives wages down for workers. And so the Democratic Party, which once upon a time was a working class-oriented party, also opposed illegal immigration for the exact same reason. Well, those days are long gone. So we're in a different world now. So that's Trump. I don't think he's been a great president. I don't think he's, in many ways, been even a good president, but I don't think he's been any worse than his predecessors, to be perfectly honest.
Mark wants to know if you think he'll be reelected.
Yeah, I think he's a shoo-in. Democrats have, I tell this to my Democrat friends, and they're horrified. Like, he can't, they're going to impeach him. I had a whole conversation months ago with Steve Bassett, who was convinced Trump was going to be impeached. I'm like, buddy, let me tell you, whatever you're smoking, keep on it because it's giving you really happy dreams. But it's not reality. All right? He's not going to be impeached. Any person the Democrats throw up against him, he's going to destroy them. And people don't understand this. Like, he is so much, as a campaigner, now he'll have the entire media establishment basically against him, but that happened last time. So I'm kind of very fond of Tulsi Gabbard on the Democratic Party side, and of course they just trash her to pieces as if she's not a non-entity. She's the new version of Ron Paul. She's the 13th floor of the building that no one ever mentions. It's like, for years it was Ron Paul, now it's Tulsi Gabbard. And I was a big Ron Paul fan.
Welcome, Alpha.
Okay,
I've got a question for Dean here. Let me just scroll back.
So then after that, and then we'll go through these posts here.
Here we go. Here's Dean.
DCW 56. Hi, Dean. Regarding the placard on some spacecraft, we come in peace for all mankind. Just who do you think NASA is talking to?
I love this. I had already planned for
Is that what we say? Is that what we actually put in our spacecraft? We come in peace for all mankind. Just who do you think NASA is talking to?
Yeah.
Seems like they know there's someone out there to read these things, maybe. Well, the official, even back in the 70s, the idea is that there was probably life out there. Why else would they send Voyager out there? So now back in the 70s, it was a much more of a minority opinion among astrophysicists. Nowadays, it's I think widely accepted that there is life everywhere.
You said on some of them, yes.
Oh my God, we come in peace. Sure, we do.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate long con that we'll be playing with them. But my attitude is I don't think anyone comes in peace. I think every life form is probably out for its survival and its best interest. I think I would consider it foolish to think otherwise for any life form, not to look out for its survival interests first and foremost. But that's just me. And Greg writes, Tulsi's the only anti-war candidate. Yeah, that's right. That's why they're trashing her. How dare she? She fills in all the check marks too.
Right,
she's a woman. She She's like Hawaiian, whatever her nationality, or Pakistan, I think, or Indian subcontinent. She's military. Like, you know, she would be like the ideal party from a diversity point of view, right? Except, whoop, she's not warlike enough. And she's an Assad, what do they call her? An Assad stooge. Sure. Because she went to Syria. This is a really good question I'd like to read from Retro Dad. This is a great question. And it's a great question because it got me to look into this.
I'm going to listen to the question while I make coffee.
Oh, yeah.
You want coffee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, please.
All right, then we can keep going.
I'll say it loud so you can hear.
Get some jet fuel, and then I'll listen in.
Very much appreciate.
All right.
Onward. I'll take the con.
All right.
This is an excellent question that Retro asked. How long can they keep a patent black? As if it is tech that it is vital to humanity. I think he's asking if it's tech that's vital to humanity, then they should not be able to seize these patents. Is there no one fighting this case, and do they eventually release after 50 years, etc.? All right, so let me just do that. So that got me to look this up, and I discovered something I didn't know about. Pardon me, it's the Invention Secrecy Act. And this is actually on Wikipedia. And what I learned, the original version of the Invention Secrecy Act was created well before World War II. And it was used during that war. Actually, I think it was 1940 or 41. And the original idea is that it would be, you'd be able to keep certain things secret during the course of the war, or every 2 years, and it would be up for renewal. I mean, in other words, I think the way it was originally passed back then was if there was a patent that was very, very critical to national security.
I'm listening. I want to hear the answer.
That it would be legitimate to keep it classified for a limited duration. That's how that act started out. In 1951, they changed this law to make it permanent. Permanent, as far as I can tell. Now, with the proviso that it would be up for review every year. Now, here's the question.
That's it.
There's a lot of classified patents out there, thousands from what I understand, and thousands that may just be dealing with energy alone. Who knows how many there are? I have no idea. What is the likelihood that there is a person, like really, or even a team, that is actually reviewing these every year saying, well, we've had this classified for 63 years. Should we, maybe we should review it and have it declassified? I think it seems very unlikely. And one thing that I got from at least looking into this was there doesn't seem to be a lot of review over the process of these classified patents. Now, if someone has information otherwise, I would really love to hear it, because this is an important issue. It's a great question. Thanks for asking it. So the Invention Secrecy Act is the thing that I learned there. Quite interesting. I'm just going to keep going. This is a question from Mark Spearman, another of our illustrious members. Hello, Mark. Mark was asking about John Mack.
Mark's in the chat too.
Oh, hey, Mark. Mark's in the chat. Says Tracy. Mark just writes, if you get the opportunity, would you consider doing a retrospective on John Mack? A remarkable intellect and a fascinating mind, independent of his abduction work. I think he offered one of the best articulations of the notion that this phenomenon may be both physical and ethereal. I agree with that as well. Would be particularly interested to get your perspective on the trajectory of his life once he began a public conversation about the phenomenon and what his legacy may be. Absolutely, yes. I will do that. I think John Mack, of course, what happened is once he went public in the early 1990s, he's a professor at Harvard University with tenure, all right? Pulitzer Prize on his biography of T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. And a highly regarded professional at Harvard and beyond. And what happened is that Harvard decided to destroy their own professor. They went out of their way to strip him of tenure. And this became a huge thing. He got written up and made fun of in Newsweek and Time magazine, and the corporate media just went after him to try to destroy him. And it was only, I think, his primary lawyer for his defense was Danny Sheehan, if I'm not mistaken, or Danny was part of that. And they were successful in keeping his tenure, as if they could strip him of tenure for simply listening to people who believed that they had abduction by extraterrestrials, and by saying these people are not crazy, there may be something going on here. For that, they just went after him. So it is a tragic story. As a writer, I would consider John Mack one of the best writers of anyone who's been in the UFO field. If you just read his works, they're beautifully written, very articulate, as Mark points out. So, and also, there's a lot of just deep insight that John Mack pointed out. He made a statement that really struck a deep chord with me many years ago, and I've never forgotten it, and I've really incorporated it into my own life, which is that he says the process of growth that we all have, he says you can look at it as in a way of the process of stripping away the illusions that we were born into. And I remembered reading that in one of his books, thinking, that is so exactly right. We go through the process of stripping away illusions about ourselves and about our society, and it's a painful process, but how else do you grow except by doing that? So I would like, sometime this year, I might do an intelligent disclosure with Tracy, or a Saturday live stream and write something out like in article form on John Mack. Or, oh, we got coffee. Or possibly, take that? I've got it. Thank you. Interview someone. Maybe I can interview Rudy Shield and we can have a John Mack conversation.
Yeah, that would be great.
But Rudy would probably want to talk about the free study, which we could do that too, actually. Maybe we could do a little bit of both.
I think there will probably be a resurgence of the John Mack, I'm going to say era, in a way, when the movie Ariel comes out.
Oh, on the Zimbabwe encounter.
More people are going to learn who he is. More people will learn about the work of Bud and John. I think through that movie, it will hit a lot of people, and
if it can get a good audience,
I think it will. I really think it will. It's just, it's done. By the way, we do know it's done. They're just, whatever happens to movies after the fact when you're getting distributors and these types of things. There's a lot going on in the background, but I think we're going to hear a lot more when that happens. Is my feeling. Earlier
in 2018, I did an interview with Randall Nickerson, who is the creator of Ariel, the movie, about that event. Randy knew John Mack very well also. And the interview I did with him is on YouTube. We have a part 2 here on the members side, don't we? I'm trying to recall.
Did we have part 2? I can't remember.
I don't remember. That was early in the year, so we may not have. In any case, we did an article I did a piece on the Rura Zimbabwe abduction.
I think you did that in a written article.
Yeah.
I think people can find that under the articles. They came to visit us at our house.
Randy and Emily Trim. I keep getting her last name.
And I think that's where you wrote it and put all of the video clips in.
That's separate from John Mack, but it's all
but he was highly involved in that. So, and I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if there are things we can mention or not. Someone's thinking of making a movie about him.
Oh, well, yeah, we can just say we know someone who's in the process of trying to do a movie about John Mack, and whether that will go anywhere is another question. I don't know. So Timur Rosenfeld. Hey, Timur. This is a good question. I like this one. So he says, can you discuss the pros and cons of the Aztec case? It's another example of a big split in ufology where some call it a complete hoax like Paul Kimball, and others like Scott Ramsey, who wrote a recent book on it, and Frank Warren believes there's something to it. Well, first of all, I would take Scott Ramsey on this over Paul Kimball any day of the week. Any period, day, period, of, period, the, period, week, period. Paul Kimball, look, I've known Paul for many years, and at this point in the game, I don't think Paul is anything other than a skeptic debunker. I don't know what he believes in anymore about this. You know, he's Stanton Friedman's nephew. Go figure. So I don't really consider Paul a valid researcher on the Aztec case. If he is able to do it if he's able to pick through Ramsey's arguments and actually debate against him, I'd be interested to see just how far he could go with that. I think Scott is the authority on the Aztec case these days and makes it very, very clear that something appears to have happened and that now it's a tough case to make, all right, because unlike with Roswell, they started on the Roswell investigation when a lot of these people were still alive in the late 70s, early 80s. Scott started on Aztec a little later, and most of the people were gone. I think some were around, and he was able to put together let's just say a suggestive, maybe a more than suggestive case that something crashed at Aztec, New Mexico in 1948. The main thing, not the main thing, but a primary thing that he and Suzanne do in that book is to point out that the argument against that case, the original hoax argument against it from 1950, was purely motivated by personal vindictiveness on the part of, I think it was a journalist, Bob Considine, who completely trashed that case because he was originally locked out of doing the investigation by Frank Scully, who was the first person to write about it in his book Behind the Flying Saucers. So I think it was Bob Considine. In any case, no, it was someone else. I can't remember, but no, I think Scott easily wins over Kimball. So you're asking the detailed pros and cons, and I don't really have those in front of me. So I'm just going to give you my opinion. I think the Aztec case was much more likely than not a legitimate crash of an extraordinary UFO. I'll just leave it at that. Should I keep going here?
See? We'll say hi to DB. We're just saying hi to everyone as they come in. So
okay.
Yes, it's a giant mug.
Absolutely.
It's rainy today, so I need an extra big.
We're actually going through a lot of these questions pretty well. This is Craig Champion.
They said here, Kevin Randall debated Scott Ramsey and didn't do too well.
No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. Kevin Randall's another one. Like, Kevin is not as much of a knee-jerk debunker as Paul Kimball is. I mean, Paul, I can't even listen to on these. He's not worth listening to me. Kevin Randall, on the other hand, is someone who has done a tremendous amount of work over the years. I certainly respect that. But he's a bit of a curmudgeon, I just have to say. And he just is. He's really a difficult person. And he's surrounded himself with a lot of these very, very strong skeptics. I don't know what's going on with Kevin. And I'm not surprised that Scott would take him down very easily. So this is from Craig Champion. Fun speculative question. What's your current sense of the leading hypotheses? ETH is at number one, with like an 80% chance of being correct. What credence might you grant to other hypotheses, such as interdimensional, paranormal, occult, breakaway civ, all of the above, occurring together to some degree? I did a whole lecture on this, which is one of my favorite lectures, which I called ET versus interdimensional and other hypotheses of UFO. Have I made that available anywhere? I think it's on YouTube somewhere.
I think
I was trying to turn that into a
version that you did in Australia.
Yeah, basically, I guess what I would say is
online.
We need like an updated version of the ETH, of the extraterrestrial hypothesis. I think part of the problem.
You should do a show on that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. That'd be easy since I have all of my notes, everything laid out for that. Basically, I think what happens is that we have been, as a society, predisposed to believing in an ETH from even 100 years ago. you think of novels like War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, you've got men from Mars, right, coming in their craft. And then you have the era of flight coming right after that, the airplane. So we're suddenly taking to the skies. And what's beyond the skies? Well, it's very obvious. It's space. It's the stars and the other planets. So I think, our natural outward view of looking at our trajectory would lead us to thinking, well, we're going out there. There's got to be are there other people out there? So I think, and it's logical that we would think this way. It's not illogical. So I think there's a strong predisposition that we would have to an extraterrestrial hypothesis, combined with the fact that, especially in the whole early part of the 20th century, Western society's mindset was ultra mechanistic, ultra materialistic. Religion was in full-scale retreat, and spiritualism was in full-scale retreat. And all of the leading thinkers of that whole era was like nuts and bolts, and it's got to be spaceships. And then I think what happened is that occultism made kind of a comeback in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and B, science made a little pivot as well into quantum theory, and people like Jacques Sarfati were some of the hippie scientists of the 60s and 70s, hippie physicists, who were bringing in entanglement to the rest of science. And so science began its own way of allowing for alternate, more strange hypotheses, right, about UFOs to come back into the mix. And of course, then you get Ballet and John Keel and the others talking about ultra-terrestrials and interdimensionals and so forth. So my feeling is, and then you get Black Budget, and you've got the Nazi tech hypothesis, and you've got simulation theory, which is even more interesting and crazy.
Yeah. I just want to add what Greg just wrote. Peter Levenda's cargo cult hypothesis is one I like. The idea of an advanced civilization living right under our noses is as mind-blowing, if not more so, than the ETH, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. I guess we have to ask ourselves, is there evidence for any of these? And I don't know. I like Peter Levenda quite a bit, and I will always find him worth listening to. I think, when you look at all of these other interesting theories, it almost seems like the ETH can be pedestrian or even boring. But I don't actually think that it's boring. I think it's actually quite interesting if you update it with the science that we now have and the concepts that we're now able to bring to the table, as opposed to the 1950s version of the extraterrestrial hypothesis of basically men and some women in metal spaceships coming to Earth and saying, "Take me to your leader." That seems really outdated to us, obviously. But I don't think that an updated version of the ETH is non-tenable. I think it's very tenable and very likely, but that it incorporates some of these other hypotheses. So I think there is a little bit of all of the above. I mean, for example, if they have a science that allows them to manipulate space and time, or space-time, which is theoretically possible, then would that allow them to do things that appear interdimensional or actually really could be interdimensional in a way? Is there science one that allows them to move through dimensions in some way that at least I can't really understand? So I think that there's a number of possibilities here. A breakaway civilization, which I've been hypothesizing for a long time now, I do think is very probably part of a mix of all of this. The question that I do have is how advanced any such runaway black budget civilization would be. I mean, I actually found myself amazed over the last 10 years at how some people have taken that idea and just run with it in directions that I would never have dared to go. And then you get the whole group of people using the phrase breakaway civilization to describe their time on Mars, where they've lived for 20 years. And I think, okay, this isn't what I meant, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just not what I would never have envisioned that, because I have no evidence to back me up. Whereas I do think that there's at least good, reasonable speculative evidence to posit the hypothesis of breakaway civilization to some extent. That is, when you look at classified technology, when you consider the fact that, as I've often mentioned, but I'll just say it here, when the NSA has computers in 1965 that are running at a clock speed of 600 plus megahertz speed, that's 35 years ahead of the consumer market, which in 1965, there were no computers anyway. So NSA, which was basically an unknown agency at that time, had possibly the fastest computers in the world, by far. So if you look at that as an example, you can see that there are other hints that the classified world is far, far, far ahead of us. That would give them the possibility of having, in a sense, a separate civilization in a lot of ways. Different science, different technology, different understanding of the world, different areas of knowledge. But to go from that idea to jump rooms and 20 and back is, I don't think the evidence warrants that. At least I don't think it does. But I think that there's a bit of an all of the above quality to some of this. And subterranean civilization, yes, I think that there is definitely subterranean elements going on, both human and probably non-human. That's what I think, not what I know.
Okay, I've got a few things for you if you're in between questions. So,
yeah, we are now.
Okay, so we've got a few. Let's go here. So Greg's just comment on that. Back to you. Is cargo cult hypothesis is compatible with the ETH? Advanced civilizations could have outposts here on Earth, like maybe what Pat Price remote viewed. And I just said I personally agree it's a highly likely scenario. As Pat Price did, right? And other remote viewers, of that caliber did as well. Plus, we know there's a lot of stuff that they're not coming out with, but we do know about Pat Price's, and can't really take that as evidence, but it sure is.
So for anyone who's just not on board with what Pat Price was, he was a great remote viewer, certainly murdered in 1975. And on one occasion, strolled into the office of Hal Puthoff and casually, off the top of his head almost, I think, said, "Oh, by the way, in my spare time, I did some remote viewing of ET bases here on Earth. There were 4 that I identified, one at Mount Hayes, Alaska, one in the Pyrenees between France and Spain, one in, I think it was Zimbabwe, in a mountain region there, and one in Western Australia, which he described as kind of a non-comic version of the Grand Central Station place of Men in Black, the movie where all the aliens met, that whole crazy scene. But he actually said this is an alien way station where they were all coming in, and there were humans there as well. This is explicitly what he said to Puthoff. And he said, and by the way, I was remote viewing them, and they seemed to become aware of me remote viewing them, and I just broke it off very quickly. He actually told us to Puthoff. And the thing with Pat Price is you have to take this guy seriously. He was so ridiculously accurate so much of the time. And Russell Targ, mentioned this in a recent interview. He said, Price was never off. In other words, he was constantly remote viewing. He was constantly getting information. And his accuracy was remarkable.
And that's why Russell said, he's really the most dangerous man in the world. He's the biggest threat to anyone who has secrets. So
that's why he had to be killed, because first of all, he was spying for the Church of Scientology, turns out. And he was giving them sensitive information that he should not have been giving, obviously. So he had enemies within, not just by the Russians, and they had reason to take him out, but the Americans did too.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Greg, because, he's definitely someone that I would pay attention to. Anything that he says is out there because his accuracy was. But
back to the question then, talking about a cargo cult, trying to think how I would fit the cargo cult hypothesis in here. Cargo cult is the idea of native, technologically backward natives see advanced technology and interpret that as gods, I suppose, and they create a cult around that, or a religion, I guess. I'm not sure how I would. I guess the idea would be that they've been here all along, and we've had encounters with them, and they've affected our development, I guess, in various ways. Maybe that's what you mean by it. But I do agree we're far, far away from a really well nailed down hypothesis that explains all of this in a confident way.
So
I'd like to try it though. I think before I'm done with this, before my life has run its final lap, as it were, I would like to try my hand at putting together my best comprehensive theory on how this is all working. I would like to try that one day.
okay.
What are you looking at here?
I'm just reading down, so I'm going to try and get at all of you who have written down underneath here. But I want to go to NTME.
Do you guys ever hear from people involved in
question?
in the construction or
Yes.
engineering of supposed secret facilities? I sometimes find myself wondering who the plumber was that installed the urinal at S4. Yeah.
Why don't we hear from more of these people,
Well, I think that there have occasionally been such people who've talked about this, but my understanding is, they're not given any information about what they're doing, and they're just told it's a secret facility. I would have to think that there are cases where if you were a plumber, you would be told this is a classified facility. There are plumbers who work on classified facilities, like that's their job, and they have to have a security clearance just like anyone else does. They have to get a background investigation done on them, just like anyone else who has a classified work would have to do. So my guess is that you're getting very, very qualified individuals who know the game. They know the drill. The book Blank Spots on the Map by Trevor Paglen. It's very interesting. In his introduction, even, he talks about his best estimate, and this is only an estimate, that of how many U.S. government documents, of the entire universe of U.S. government documents, how many are classified. And I don't think he knows, but I think he was estimating it could be as much as 50%. So just imagine if that were the case. 50% of all documents created by the United States government in one form or another being classified, being secret. That would actually mean that in terms of actual documentary output, half of what your government produces is secret from you. Half. And he talked about how many millions of individuals work with security clearances and have some level of security clearance. So these are people who are sworn to secrecy. Now, that doesn't mean that they all keep the secrets, but I think most of them probably do. I'm not someone who is in that world, and I've never had a security clearance for anything. So I don't really know from personal experience, but I do know that if you've done something that's considered very, very sensitive, you're going to be monitored probably for the rest of your life, at least periodically, to whatever degree the powers that be deem it necessary to monitor you. So it doesn't mean just because you installed a urinal at S4 that you're going to be telling people, yeah, I was at S4, I installed their urinals.
He said, I'm a master electrician, by the way, and if I got hired, I'd spill the beans.
I'm going to guess that you wouldn't get hired.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But we would try to get you hired, so you get our vote.
Definitely.
All right. Shall I go on? I have a question from Debrita.
Okay, you can go, and then I'm going to come back to Emma.
So I think Debrita is a cutesy name. I think it's a cute name she gave herself. I'm going to guess her name is Deborah. But she's Debrita, which we approve of that. So very good.
Maybe that's her name.
Oh, well, if it is, even better. Debrita says, hey, Richard and Tracy. Love you guys. Happy Mother's Day. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is on Jacobs, which, by the way, my old friend Roseanne Losey followed up on this and basically did a second. But what Debrita says is, just read David Jacobs' The Threat. After listening to your conversations on the seeding, I have to say that some of the stories are very similar to what Jacobs has mentioned in his book. It's pretty unsettling as to what is happening in the breeding program and how the independent hybrid activity, IHA, of the aliens now seems to be running their own abductions without the help of the Greys, right? This really does sound like the planet acquisition, as Jacobs once said. Are some of David's stories in the movie? And of course, what are your thoughts? Okay, so first of all, you really want to check out. So The Threat was 1998, as you point out. And after that, he wrote Walking Among Us, which was from 2010, 2011, something like that. Mm-hmm. Well, we recently had David. David's on our site. Mm-hmm. So I did
two parts.
Two parts. The first part of my interview with David is fully on YouTube, and a lot of people have watched that. And I don't know how many more full interviews David is going to be giving anymore. I really had to twist his arm for this one. But it's a great interview. Okay. And then we did a part 2 with David as well. And those are both on our website. I would encourage you to listen to these interviews. On top of that, all the latter half of 2018, Tracy and myself and many of the members on this site were having discussions about David Jacobs specifically, and really trying to work through Jacobs' ideas here and comparing them to some of the much more new agey ideas of people like Barbara Lamb, or even figuring out like where's Yvonne Smith in all this and her hypno-regression concepts and so forth. So we spent a lot of time trying to go through this and trying to figure out our thoughts on David Jacobs. I'll just give you my thought, and you can come in here on yours. I think David is the only UFO researcher that I am aware of who's actually gone through the trouble of trying to do genuine counterintelligence on these other beings. In other words, trying to understand what it is they are doing by studying the abduction phenomenon. And yes, his concept is planetary acquisition. He believes very firmly they're out here to take over the planet. And that, other researchers, like the folks who did the free study, and Barbara and others, he says, they may be nice people, but they're totally wrong. 100% wrong. He says, I'm right, they're wrong. That's all there is to it. And sorry, I've done the work, they haven't. And he's very upfront about this. He's not mean.
Well, he has reasons for believing this, right? Yeah. He believes that, particularly in the case of the free study, those were self-reports. Yeah. So he doesn't believe that there is access at the conscious level to these experiences, that all of them are a form of manipulation. And you have to go beyond the level that Barbara and Yvonne go to, which is sort of a one hypnosis session level. 1, 2, 3, maybe, because, it's probably expensive for people who go. Maybe some have gone longer, but he's basically saying it's not far enough.
He does these for free. And he actually made this a very, very definite point when he's talking to us. And it's not taking away from Barbara or Yvonne Smith or anyone else who does them, who charges money for them. Yeah. They're allowed to charge money for it. It's totally legit. But the fact is, if you're going to pay $100 for a session or whatever it is, most people are only going to have so many sessions before they think, okay, I've spent enough money here. David, when he takes on someone, he does it for free. And that means he goes in multiple times. And his position is, you're not going to get to the truth for the first or even second or maybe even third regression. You might be. You're not going to get it the first time. So the conscious memory, and this is all like the free study, all right, which only just came out less than a year ago. These are all, as Tracy said, self-reported. So they're all conscious. And they're all very positive, or most of them. And the people putting this out, Ray Hernandez, I think being the main person, they're very upfront and very kind of strident, I would say, in saying, see, we have a different and better and more accurate take on abductions, and it's very positive. And all these negativists like Jacobs, they're not using his name, but basically, really have it wrong, and they're fear-based. You hear a lot of this. But I don't know. My instinct is to think that David is much more accurate than the self-reported Southern California. And most of them are from Southern California, it seems to me. Like such a high percentage. And they have, and I just have to say this, I get a very strong impression, many, maybe a majority, are very overtly into New Age spirituality. And I have a hard time thinking that that's especially objective.
Yeah.
Personal opinion.
See, I don't know. I have several different thoughts about it. One of them is that I believe there are possibly multiple agendas, just as if we were now spacefaring and we were going off and exploring all the different planets. We wouldn't just have one single faction. We would have all of these different factions of us going out with different ideas about what we wanted to do, and we would go about those things in different ways. So it could be one group that's doing something like that. One's doing scientific, one's doing something for other reasons. Or there could be all sorts of civilizations coming from all different angles. So I think it is possible that that could be the case. We're dealing with so many different groups.
I would agree with you.
I
think it's very likely that there could be multiple agendas that are operating here.
However, I think David makes a super valid point that we possibly aren't going deep enough. I did my regression with Barbara a little while ago, and I still am not really talking about it that much. I did a little bit in the hooded being off the cuff we did, but because I still feel like I'm not sure. I'm fascinated by what I saw. I do believe it with a grain of salt, but I still didn't get all of the answers. It still didn't come completely clear, and I feel I would have to go deeper. So for me, and I do feel certain, the only thing I feel certain about is that there was absolutely cognitive manipulation just because of the circumstances. And so if there was nothing bad, why would there be any manipulation at all? Why would we have any of these missing parts? Why would there be missing time? Why would, why wouldn't they explain why they were doing the medical procedures? Why wouldn't they? I mean, I know in a lot of the positive encounters, they're saying they are giving them messages about humanity and, to treat the earth better and, these types of things.
I'm sorry, but these are lame ass types
of. I mean, those would be really great
things to say to people.
But those would be really great screen memories to distract us with.
I mean,
if they had some other agenda for themselves, It
has always struck me as really bizarre to take any random person, all right, and I mean, we're all random people ultimately, right? So you take some person and you give them this message. Mm-hmm. Like in Yvonne Smith's book, Chosen. Mm-hmm. This is everywhere. It's like all these people believe that they have been chosen to give a message to mankind. Mm-hmm. When you read the biographies of some of these people, you're just like, really? You? Like, how is that possible? Like, but they believe this. Like a lot of people like to believe that they are the messenger now of God. We just got an email from a lady who called herself a goddess, that she was Joan of Arc and she was, what was the other thing?
I am Mary Magdalene incarnate. I am Joan of Arc. I am, what's the other one?
She had a really important information she had to share with me, apparently. We get these frequently. It's very, very bizarre. We're going to have to collect them.
Yeah, that was going on our collect list.
Yeah, we have to keep these. But anyway, I just have a hard time that thinking every random person who's being told, your planet's in danger, you have to do something to change the world. Like, how is this an effective means of transforming anything? I don't understand. It just seems so low level. Like a couple of people here, a couple of people there. We got 7+ billion people on this planet.
I don't know, but even Barbara says in the movie The Seeding, by the way, because we've seen that, and she may have said it to you, I can't remember, but they are still taking people against their will and doing medical procedures and sometimes taking, she talks about it in that movie, right? Taking the fetus. And so there still are things happening against people's will, even in the good scenarios, but I think sometimes, not all the time, but this is a psychological reframing for people to help themselves be okay with something that is really traumatic.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there.
And I don't want to say that for everyone. I've had my own experiences, and I think it's very complex and it's very difficult to put a blanket statement on any of this. Can you go back up to L? Or
there's some really, really good comments here. I'm just seeing.
I know. There's so many.
I don't know where. Kirsten said, I just want to mention Kirsten Blackburn. She says, you have our permission to tell Kurt's hybrid story. And I remembered we met with Kirsten and
on the cruise,
her great dude Kurt on our cruise, and they're both of them are fabulous. And I want to get the details. I remember he told us this story; it was incredible. But why am I not able to recollect the details?
Give us a couple of hints again. I can't.
You're gonna have to listen,
remember.
Kirsten. Write to us, please. Write us.
Just write here a couple things to jog my memory, and I'll remember.
All right, well, I would like to get the full story. I remembered when I heard it, I wanted this whole story. Oh, I remember it all.
There we go.
Oh, that was a very... Mark, I'll get to... Mark H. Richard, maybe ET has divided the USA up. Good to the right, bad to the left. I don't know if you mean that politically or not. I'm not sure if that would make... Not sure. Oh, and then also Deborah is Debrita.
Yes.
She said that's her salsa name.
Yes. So Deborah's here.
Nailed it.
Deborah.
Got it.
Car crash. Oh, the car crash story.
No, I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Kirsten's boyfriend, dude, partner, significant other, Kurt, who I really like meeting Kurt a lot. So he had a very bizarre story, and I think I don't know if I want to tell it because I'll miss too many details. But he was driving in Seattle, 1990s.
Yeah, I remember.
Late at night. And a car, he stops at a light. Car slams into him from behind. Like ridiculous, like someone obviously not paying attention. Kurt gets out of the car. The guy, I don't think the guy gets out of the car right away. Bald? Is he bald? Very bizarre. No social skills.
I think he said he had really strange hair. Is that right, Kirsten?
This is a very weird person who had absolutely no capability to interact in any kind of normal way with other people. And he's like no social, like just the way Jacobs describes these hybrids is exactly how this person was. Basically, Jacobs, if you really understand how Jacobs describes these hybrids, they were like significantly on the spectrum of autism. And that's really how in other words, there's no emotional intelligence with them, with the hybrids. And this is the case with this individual. But even beyond that, there's like no knowledge of the workings of society. And there's this ability that this hybrid shows of totally escaping any kind of repercussions. So what happens is guy slams into him. They're talking. Do you remember any of this? Mm-hmm. And we're going to call him
there were many unusual things about him because this was very similar to Ben's story. So I kind of get them mixed up a little bit because we've heard
in our group.
Yes, we've heard two stories that were so similar and so interesting because the being
this one.
No, I'm saying I'm going to let Kirsten tell me if I mix them up. The being, the person, the human was so unusual. I believe when he hit his car, right? And then when he went to approach him, he just stared at Kurt for a really long time. Just so unusual, like a completely unusual reaction. His hair was completely unusual. His clothing was so strange.
Right, bizarre.
He had the whole car was filled with roses, right? Right?
Yeah.
The whole car was...
He said he was selling roses, Kirsten says here.
Right. And the cop was nearby, had run out of gas.
There was a cop, a block down, that was just sitting there watching the whole thing, but had no gas in his car. What police vehicle has no gas in it? But this cop either believed he had no gas in his car or actually had no gas in his car. So the cop did not arrive for quite a while after the accident, which is a very weird thing. this person asks Kurt, "Oh, would you like some roses? Or would you like?" Oh, and then he says, "Oh, I have your model car." Or yes, it's like these bizarre things, total non sequitur, having no relationship to the situation at hand. Kurt tries to get insurance information out of the guy. That's, I think, a big fail.
No,
you have a Subaru.
Yeah.
I have a Subaru.
Yeah, he said the strangest things. Yeah,
right.
You can see what Kirsten's writing, but some of you who are seeing this afterward, I don't know if you get to see the chat or not.
So the guy later in that evening, after he left this scene, completely was allowed to leave, has another crash of the same. Oh, it's a rental car too, wasn't it? Wasn't it a rental car? Kirsten, answer that if you can. I think it's a rental. Crashed the car.
Familiar. Yeah. Yeah.
Several hours later, right? This guy wasn't drunk, as far as anyone could tell, and no one ever found him. He was not
rental car with no insurance.
Rental car with no insurance. Right. There's more details. Listen, Kirsten, you must get Kurt to write this out for us.
I said, or we could put it on audio, because let's stop and let's tell it properly.
Yeah.
If Kurt's up for that, because it is a really good story.
Banging around here.
Yeah, and it's just hard to remember the total details of this. But I want to just come back to Emma, because we were in this area that she was bringing up earlier.
I see.
Yeah, right. Because we were talking about Carla Turner. For so long we were into David and Barbara, and then we kept saying, like, Carla's got some really interesting stuff, and she does, and we're still reading her.
All right, yeah, I think that's fair. So we're going to make a note when we're done here. There's John Mack and Carla Turner. We want to come back and do like some detailed assessment of. I think that's fair.
Yeah, because Carla definitely is along the lines of she believes there's serious manipulation going on. Or
right.
I always do that with people in the current tense. But yeah, so I think we should add her to this whole mix.
I have one mild reservation about Carla Turner. I think that she was very, very on point, very smart, very insightful. I just sometimes feel like when I read over, especially in Taken, I don't know if I feel or not that she was too credulous of some of her witnesses. Like, she was really willing to go like into anyone's dream, like just anyone's dream, and just take those dreams as reflections of what actually was going on. And some of the accounts just struck me as more likely someone's fantasy recollection than an actual event. But I wouldn't say that of all of them. So I think Carla Turner was, absolutely legit and worth diving into, and I would like to follow up with her.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Okay, so Retro asks, am I going to do weekly wrap later tonight? Yes, I am. I have other things on my mind other than the AMA, so I'm going to do my standard weekly wrap in probably as soon as we're done with this.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to Daryl here. I'm not sure if we have covered anything.
There's one or two others here, but...
Oh, hey, WC. I didn't see here before, I don't think. Speaking of underground civilizations, what are your thoughts on Phil Schneider? Not sure if you've heard him talk about his story before. Do you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, Phil Schneider was almost certainly murdered in his hotel room in the 1990s, and gave a number of lectures in the 90s on his experiences, as he described it anyway, being in an underground facility and having a shootout actually with extraterrestrials. And that's how he said he lost his finger. I've never figured out my take on Phil Schneider. I don't know. Why am I drawing a blank here? Because it's a long story. Because Schneider included documents in his lectures. I didn't know this until I learned about it from a guy named Darcy Weir, who did a documentary on Schneider. It's on YouTube. I'm in it. Darcy did not he did not include my reservations on Schneider. Schneider had documents that he would show at conferences, allegedly from his father, whose name was Oscar Schneider, who supposedly was in the German Abwehr, that's Hitler's intelligence agency, came over. And according to Phil Schneider, his dad was a member of basically the MJ-12 group. And there are letters that he has of Oscar Schneider basically bossing General Nathan Twining around relating to matters of extraterrestrial policy. I found that very non-believable. And another letter of Oscar Schneider, his dad, communicating in correspondence with Edward Condon back in the 1950s. And this is where I think it's just a fake letter, because it's in, I think the letter's dated 1954, and he's talking to Condon about, I just attended your lecture in Boulder. Well, that's very interesting, because in 1954, Condon was working at Corning Glass in New York State, not at University of Colorado Boulder, where he became famous in the 1960s as the head of the Condon Committee at Boulder, Colorado. In the 1950s, Condon wasn't working in Boulder, as far as I could tell, at all. This is in the era before Wikipedia, before Google searches, and my guess is that Schneider or whoever fed him the document figured they could get away with this lie, just make up, I mean, Edward Condon and Nathan Twining, even in the 90s, were very famous people in the UFO field. Their names had a lot of high name recognition. So you have Oscar Schneider communicating with Condon and Nathan Twining. That would add to Phil Schneider's credibility. But I think that those letters are fake. I don't believe that they're real. And so the fact that Phil Schneider showed fake letters, in my opinion, at his conferences is a big mark against him. Now, did he do anything in the underground facilities? Well, I mean, his description of them is entirely legit in the sense that it's true. Like, we have had for a long time very, very incredible capability to go deep underground. And Schneider was one of the first people to really bring that up. So I don't know. I mean, and he was murdered, in my opinion. I think he was definitely murdered. So someone got him. So that's one thing that actually speaks as possibly in his behalf. But it's a complicated thing with Schneider. I don't really know what I think. Ultimately, I don't know if I'll ever really know.
So I want to hit Alan, I want to hit Daryl, and I just want to say Retro and Kirsten and a couple other people, and Susie were asking about remote viewing. Retro was saying...
is Retro Pirate the same as Retro Dad, by the way? I need to know. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Tracy should do more remote viewing. You've ever considered doing it live, like an experiment to show people how it works? What I have thought about is having you guys do it live, actually. I would give you a target. Because there's something to be said for being in a state of mind. I've talked about this sometimes. Your regular state is beta. Some of you might be familiar with this, some not. But you really need to drop down into a more relaxed alpha at the very least, or even go deeper to get accurate impressions. And so under these circumstances of everybody watching, this pressure, it's more difficult for me to just sink down into something where I'm not distracted by any of this. It's very difficult.
So we'll do to them what Russell Targ did to us.
Yeah, so what I would do is I would turn it around, because really it's not about me proving to you what I can do. It's really about proving to you what you can do. And then you'll understand, what I'm talking about.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, so I have been thinking about that. I think that would be something fun that we could do. I don't think we would do it regularly or anything, but
I would actually like to give you a target or a series of targets. Mm-hmm. And you always say to me that wouldn't work because you would know what my targets are, but I don't think that you would know what my targets are.
I know this is really easy to see, but this is why I have to prove it to him by having him do it. Because if you're dealing with someone who's super interested in certain topics, okay, the ego, you just can't help it. The ego is going to guess. Mm-hmm. And I guess without sort of breaking down how all of remote viewing works, it's hard to understand that. But the monkey mind is going to guess. Like if I have a deck of 52 cards, it doesn't matter. Your mind is going to be throwing out guesses. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be very difficult for you to get the actual psychic signal. So remote viewing protocols are all about being able to get into a state and differentiate from the guessing. We put the guessing in a certain column, then you have to begin to recognize through practice when the actual information is coming through. It's a fascinating self process. It's really all about you inside you. This is what's so fascinating. It's a game inside yourself. So this is why when Richard throws this out all the time, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, except I know him, inside and out, what he would want to know. My mind would have a guessing field day, and I just know those are not.
I could throw some curveballs.
Those are not the circumstances that you want to do it under. So for me, I prefer to have infinite possibilities. I will perform, in my opinion, at least I'll feel better. I like to perform with 0. I don't even like to have a target number. I like to work with X.
Mm-hmm.
For any target at all, X. And I would prefer to be someone, doubly removed, so that it wouldn't be coming from Richard.
Right.
So, and it would need to, this is why people go and they practice it for so long, that you need to work up this skill with yourself.
I want to point out we're past 2 hours, and every time we do this beyond, Google cuts us off at 2 hours.
Oh, shoot.
All right. So now there's a way to make this longer, but what's going to happen is when we post this,
You guys are up for that. Okay.
we're 8 minutes past 2 hours now, so the first 8 minutes are going to be cut off.
But we can fix it later.
Yeah, I don't know how.
Okay.
Lori knows how. I don't know how. So
Okay.
anyway, I'm just going to say we're going for a long time. So I just want to say a couple of questions. Retro wants to know, what coffee do we drink? This is Tim Hortons. Best coffee in the world. It's the drugs.
To him.
They have drugs in their coffee, clearly superior drugs. So I'm to Tim Hortons. You like your Starbucks Americano.
I do.
So there we go. Despite the fact that you're Canadian.
Well, yes. I wanted to get.
There's a couple of other
Daryl
questions
didn't
in
get
there.
a question in here, and I want to make sure he gets.
And there's one or two more here. And then
Oh,
we got,
and Alan. Okay, so Daryl, where?
in fact, this is one from Alan here.
Yeah.
Alan Dolan.
Okay, go for Alan.
Why don't organizations like MUFON follow their mandate of evidence-based UFO investigations when it selects speakers whose topics are substantially subjective and personal instead of evidence-based? Well,
He loves that.
I can't speak for MUFON, but look, especially at their conferences, you got to give the people what they want. And yes, I agree with you. Evidence-based, you followed it. I just did a whole thing on that yesterday, of course, and I wrote a piece for our site. But there's a huge market in this field. When I first became a public person in the UFO field, I was really not expecting that. I'd spent all the 1990s really focused on the hardcore nuts and bolts ufology of the past, and that was always my focus, and I thought that's all that there was. I had no idea that there was this intensely subjective element to this phenomenon that many, many people do take. And really, it caught me very much off guard, but it's absolutely huge. And MUFON, I can't speak. I mean, I will just say when in 2017, when for the first time in 6 years, I was invited to speak again at MUFON after I guess I annoyed them in 2011. But Jan Harzan invited me to speak about a secret space program. He wanted me to give a lecture on the secret space program early 2017, and I didn't know what he was up to. And I said, well, I'm kind of done looking at that. I'm moving on to other things. He said, well, I would really like to. So I said, sure, I'll come up. I'll do new research. I'll come up with fresh ideas here. Then Tracy finds out that he had planned me to do a panel with Corey Good, Andrew Basiago, William Tompkins, who was alive at that time, Michael Salla, anyone else? Those guys, all on the secret space program. And I actually yelled at Jan.
Oh my God, he's not going to like that.
I got on the phone with him and I said, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? They are not credible. And this whole thing. And Jan said, I mean, Jan's a really nice person, but he was totally weaseling out here. He says, well, we just want to have all the perspectives out there. Let the people decide. And I'm like, what? You let the people decide that? He said, well, would you like me to pull you from the panel? And I said, no, I'm doing this panel. And I'm glad I did that panel. But what were they really doing? It was a very well-attended conference.
That's the thing. I think it was for turnout.
It's all for turnout. Now, they alienated a number of their members, but they also got a lot of other people who were very engaged in those stories.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe those stories, but other people do. So a lot of it is just appeasing. It's pleasing the crowd. And there's only one last question here.
Okay. Well,
but we dealt with it.
Yeah, we did. We talked about that one. So this is from Daryl. Hi, both. Want to read it?
Luis Elizondo has been very careful not to discuss any thoughts about who or where the craft they are researching are. Did he say one rather cryptic statement saying we maybe need to? Oh, he did say one rather cryptic statement saying maybe we need to. Continued. Start considering ourselves as humankind rather than humankind. Humankinds. Do you feel he may be pointing towards your breakaway civilization hypothesis? Well, I do think I've never spoken with Luis Elizondo, but I would be pretty confident to say that he's holding a lot of information back that he knows. He worked for Robert Bigelow at the NIDS, at the Skinwalker Ranch. Luis Elizondo worked at the Skinwalker Ranch for Robert Bigelow way back in the day. So what does that mean? That means Elizondo knows a lot of weirdness and strangeness that is going on right in this world. And that clearly has, let me put my coffee down, that's got to have gotten him into where he is at the ATIP program. I don't think that these are unrelated. So the connection with Bigelow is very key. So I believe, and since Robert Bigelow probably knows more than any of us really about the UFO phenomenon, I believe Bigelow is one of the most knowledgeable people probably in the world about this. I fully believe this.
Yeah, when people ask, who would you like to sit down with?
Yeah, Bigelow would be one.
Yeah.
And Elizondo has been close to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Luis Elizondo knows a great deal,
mm-hmm.
my opinion. So I think he's holding a huge amount of information back. And he has to, I've said this as well. I think he has to, politically. That's why they're doing this whole, what I call a rebranding of UFOs into UAP, because they know if they keep pushing UFO disclosure, it's not going to go anywhere. So they rebranded as UAP with this idea, as you mentioned in your question, we don't really know what they are. And he does a lot of this what ifs and hypotheticals of UAP. And I think he does that because he has to, because that's how he's positioning this for the public. But I don't think that he believes any of that. Not at all. I think he's got clear ideas about what we're dealing with. And those ideas are that they're not from here. Whether they're, I don't know if he thinks that they're extraterrestrial or interdimensional. I might think both for all I know. But he's definitely, Kirsten says, wow. Well, okay. Should someone ask Elizondo why he didn't ask who is behind the wheel of the UFOs? Yeah. Greg Phillips. Is this a Greg Phillips that I know? Tell me down below. I'm trying to think. I believe I may know you from old-time Facebook days. If that's so, good to see you again. I think that may be you. I'm trying to remember the names.
Greg has been here with us all along and in all our chats on YouTube. And so I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, yeah. No, we haven't met. Okay, sorry. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Elizondo. I think that he knows way, way, way more. And all of this pretense, well, we don't know what they are. I think that's just total fiction for the public. I think it's pure public consumption. Necessary. I'm not even faulting him for it. I just think he's doing what he feels he needs to do.
Hmm.
So, have we covered everything? We should probably get close to wrapping this up.
We have been here for so long. You guys have been here for so long. I can't believe it. On Mother's Day, too.
Yeah.
I just want to say, because a lot of people are going to be watching this after the fact. We have our thing going here, but hi to everyone who's going to be watching this later. And just want to thank everyone because I see so many of you. Richard doesn't even see it as often in the public YouTube shows.
I almost never.
Yes,
see
I
those.
see so many members, and I'm like, wow. I mean,
Tracy
it's just
tells me.
so awesome how many of you are there and here and support in both places. And just want to thank you all. And I love these little private groups that we have when we do our AMAs.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're really nice. I know we don't get to every single thing, but we do our best, as you can see, to try to make it balanced.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is fun. And
some really tough questions, some interesting ones. I wish I could have answered Frank's questions a little bit better. Those were really good, very technical questions, and I don't have a lot of answers for those. But there were other really great questions that got me thinking. So they were good learning experiences for me. So it makes me really want to have a forum because it seems to me that there's so much knowledge that this whole community has.
yeah.
It would be nice to see it on a forum, and I know that will happen.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. Like every single member has this incredible background or things that they've been researching or super interested in. And so we're really looking forward to getting that forum out. So don't think because it's not there yet that we aren't dedicated to it. It is, we're doing a test forum this week that you probably won't see until we know it's ready.
Mark just says, where's the best place to get an email answered? I would say the members' email.
It is, I know, we just have so many right now. That's the only reason, Mark, I know you've got a lot of emails in the queue there.
Right.
We, and a lot, there's just a lot for us to manage. And so we can only do so many things in a day. And then we try to hit off some emails each day and
it is
our
hard.
work. And it's
Yeah,
hard.
it's tough. It's not that we don't value them, we do. But at some point, we will have to hire someone
Yeah.
to help us go through these because it's not becoming possible.
Yeah.
Like honestly, before I knew Tracy, year in, year out, I would have 10,000, 15,000 unread emails in my mailbox all the time. Like 15,000. One time, in the early years, I got up to like 5,000, 6,000 unreads, and I thought, oh God, I'll never look at these. And I just marked them all as read. And then I started over again, and it got up to like 12,000, 13,000. I'm like, I can't, it's not possible for me. Or if that's my kids. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
it
Mike
is.
and Elaine. They're coming in. We could either put them on or you'll just hear them. They're coming back. So
But
anyway,
we're
it's
working on getting
impossible.
better at it. Yeah.
Tracy's been a huge help.
I do my best, but I still can't get to them. So I apologize.
Yeah, so I think we may bring someone into the fold at some point.
Maybe we
Okay,
can hire some more.
Guys,
Yeah.
just want to let you know we're finishing a live stream here.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you want, you can come say hello to everyone, or you can just, they're shaking
we're
their head. So we're just wrapping up.
It's a no. We're just
So-
wrapping up.
All right, that's good. All right, so we just want to thank all of you guys for being here, and I'm going to go do a weekly wrap in a short while. I don't know how long it's going to be, but at least probably 30, 40 minutes, most of it. I have a few things I want to say.
Yeah, and then we'll get the newsletter out with all the wrap up from the last week, and just so people who are here, you guys probably already know, and people who are watching this after the fact, check the junk mail. If you're a member, you're automatically signed up for it, and it's a recap of what we posted Sunday to Sunday. But there, we now have the ability at the bottom of posts to sign up for notifications if anyone adds a comment to that post, or if you just want notifications in general of new posts.
Yeah,
So
it's a nice
just check
feature.
at the very, very bottom of a page, and you can just click it and give us some feedback of how it's working. Mark H tells us it's working really well. So
Retro's like, how exciting. Put the kids on, please. No can do.
Sorry.
They're
no,
not
they
gonna do it.
passed.
Not going to happen.
Anyhow, it was great hanging out with you guys.
Yes.
It's really cool.
All right, so hope everyone has a great rest of the day, whether you're in UK, Australia, US, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in the rest of the world. It's been great, and I personally enjoyed these a lot. We'll have to
Yeah, I
figure
do
out,
too.
though, we have to get Lori to get the first 20 plus minutes now
Yeah,
available because it's going to get cut right off.
no.
So,
It'll be up soon.
all right,
We'll get that sorted out.
everyone have a great rest of the whatever, and we'll be back in touch soon.
Okay, take care.
Bye.